What is it that stops us from reaching our potential? It's a simple question, yet one that lingers in the back of our minds, isn't it? We all have dreams and ambitions, things we want to achieve, but there's often something that holds us back, something invisible, something we can't always put our finger on. Fear. Fear is the quiet force that rules us, shaping so much of what we do and don't do without us even realizing it. It's in the whisper of doubt before we take a step forward, in the hesitation before we speak our truth, in the shiver we feel when we think about taking a risk. You've felt it, haven't you? That feeling of dread when you think about failure. Whether it's a new job you're scared to take, a relationship you're afraid might crumble, or just the thought of stepping out of your comfort zone. Even the most ambitious, successful people feel it, sometimes more than anyone else. Fear isn't picky. It doesn't care about your success, your wealth, or your achievements. It slips into every part of our lives: our career, relationships, health, and self-worth. Take, for instance, the fear of rejection. It's so common, yet it can be so paralyzing. Whether we're applying for a job, sharing a creative project, or simply speaking up in a conversation, we worry about what others will think. Will they approve? Will they accept us? And with that worry comes the temptation to hide, to play it safe, to avoid rejection altogether. But in doing so, we miss the chance to truly grow, to take the risks that lead to greater success. And then there's the fear of failure, the fear that no matter how hard we try, things won't work out. It's the nagging thought that says, what if I'm not good enough? Or what if I don't measure up? It keeps us stuck in a loop of indecision, unable to move forward. We all experience it at some point, whether we're trying to make a big career move, launch a business, or even change something in our personal lives. But here's something interesting. If you look at history, you'll see that those who have been able to wield power didn't avoid fear. They understood it. Machiavelli, the famous political thinker, had an intriguing perspective on power. In his world, fear wasn't a weakness to be feared, but a tool to be controlled and used. He understood that fear could influence decisions, shape behavior, and even build respect and authority. This raises an important question for us. How can we, too, learn to use fear to our advantage instead of letting it rule us from the shadows? The challenge isn't to avoid fear. It's to master it. What if the answer to conquering fear didn't lie in running from it, but in embracing it? In turning that force from something that holds us back into something that propels us forward? In the next part, we'll explore how to use fear the way Machiavelli did, as a powerful tool for transformation. What if we could look at fear not as a foe to be feared, but as a resource to be tapped into? Imagine this. There's a woman named Sarah, a mid-level manager at a growing tech company. She's been working hard for years, but she's hit a crossroads. There's an upcoming meeting where she's been asked to present a new idea for a major project, something she's passionate about. But as the meeting day draws nearer, she feels her stomach twist. What if her idea isn't good enough? What if her colleagues laugh, or worse, dismiss her entirely? She tries to push the thought away, but it lingers. When the day arrives, she barely speaks, deferring to others, her idea left unsaid. The meeting ends, and Sarah walks away, disappointed in herself, knowing that she had the chance to shine, but couldn't push through the fear. This happens all the time. The fear of failure, the fear of rejection. It stops us from moving forward, even when we know we have something valuable to offer. But what makes fear so paralyzing? It all comes down to psychology. Fear is deeply rooted in our biology. For thousands of years, our ancestors had to deal with immediate, life-threatening dangers, whether it was a predator in the wild or a rival tribe. To survive, humans evolved a powerful fight-or-flight response. When faced with a danger, we react quickly, either by confronting it or running away. In those moments, thinking wasn't the priority, acting was. But in today's world, this instinct is often misapplied. Our challenges aren't typically life or death. They're emotional, social, or intellectual. The stress of making an important decision, the pressure of speaking in public, the uncertainty of starting something new. None of these require us to fight or flee. They require us to think, to plan, to take calculated risks. Yet, when faced with these modern challenges, our brains often react as if we're under threat, activating that primal survival instinct. This is where many of us get stuck. We're not dealing with physical threats, but our brains are still wired to respond as if we are. So instead of calmly navigating a tough decision, we feel paralyzed, unable to move forward. We get stuck in survival mode, reacting impulsively, avoiding discomfort, and staying in our safe zones. And that can keep us from making bold decisions or thinking creatively. We might stay in jobs we don't enjoy, avoid relationships that could bring us joy, or fail to take the risks that could lead to greater rewards, all because we're trapped in a mindset built for a different time. It's important to realize that feeling paralyzed by fear isn't a sign of weakness. It's a natural response to an environment that doesn't always align with our ancient instincts. Fear, in this sense, is not the problem. It's how we let it control us that holds us back. It's not you. Fear is the enemy of ambition, creativity, and inner peace. It clouds our judgment and makes us question our own worth. But here's the key. Just because fear is natural doesn't mean it has to dictate our lives. Machiavelli understood this. He saw fear as a powerful force that could either control us or be controlled by us. In the next section, we'll see how he turned fear into a tool for mastery, something that didn't stop him, but instead pushed him toward greater power and influence. What if, like Machiavelli, we could use fear to fuel our growth instead of letting it hold us back? Niccolò Machiavelli, the renowned philosopher and political strategist, had a very specific view of fear, one that might surprise you. In his famous work, The Prince, Machiavelli argued that fear, when controlled, is one of the most powerful tools a ruler can wield. He didn't shy away from the idea that fear could be used to command respect and maintain authority. In fact, he believed that fear, properly managed, could prevent betrayal, force loyalty, and align others with your goals. Now, you might be thinking, that's all well and good for kings and politicians, but what does it have to do with me? The truth is, Machiavelli's insights don't just apply to rulers. They can be applied to ourselves too. Machiavelli's philosophy wasn't about dominating others through fear. It was about understanding how fear functions and using it to your advantage. Think about it. Fear is a powerful motivator. When people are afraid of consequences, they take action, whether it's the fear of losing their job, the fear of falling behind, or the fear of missing out. But it's not just about wielding fear over others. It's about wielding it over yourself. Imagine for a moment that you could control your own fear. Instead of trying to eliminate it or ignore it, something that most of us struggle with, you could reframe it as an ally. Fear, in this sense, is no longer something that paralyzes you. Instead, it becomes a source of energy, propelling you forward when you feel vulnerable or uncertain. Machiavelli's most famous tactic sheds light on how this works. The fear of loss is more motivating than the desire for gain. Think about that for a second. It's not the promise of success that drives us. It's the fear of what might happen if we fail to act. This subtle shift in focus can be incredibly powerful. Let me give you an example of how this tactic can play out in real life. Take a business owner. Let's call him Alex. Alex has a dream to expand his small business, but he's overwhelmed by self-doubt. What if he invests all this time and money and it doesn't work? What if the risk is too much? He's frozen in indecision, stuck in that familiar trap of fear. But then, something changes. Instead of focusing on the possible rewards, profits, growth, success, Alex begins to focus on the consequences of inaction. If he doesn't act, he risks stagnation, falling behind his competitors, and losing the very business he's worked so hard to build. That fear of loss, the fear of watching everything slip away, becomes a catalyst for action. Alex pushes through his self-doubt, makes the tough decisions, and takes the risks that ultimately lead to his business growing beyond what he had originally imagined. This is the power of using fear strategically. By focusing on the fear of loss, we can push through the paralysis that often holds us back and make decisions that lead to growth, even when we're feeling uncertain. So, here's the big question. What if you could apply this tactic to your own life? What if, instead of letting fear hold you back, you could use it to drive you forward, especially in those moments when you feel most vulnerable or hesitant? What if the fear of losing something precious, your time, your potential, your future, could become the very thing that pushes you into action? In the next section, we'll dive into how you can take this Machiavellian strategy and begin applying it to your own mindset. What would happen if you learned to harness fear, just like a ruler would? How could it change the way you approach challenges and opportunities? Fear of loss is a powerful motivator, a force that can often drive us to action in ways that the fear of failure never quite manages to do. There's a psychological principle behind this: loss aversion. It's the human tendency to fear losses more than we value equivalent gains. In other words, the pain of losing something we already have, whether it's a relationship, a job, or a precious opportunity, feels much more intense than the pleasure of gaining something new, even if the new thing is just as valuable. This principle explains why, when faced with a tough decision, we often find ourselves more driven by the fear of what we could lose than by the potential rewards of success. Think about it. How many times have you taken action not because you were excited by the prospect of gain, but because you were terrified of losing something important? It could be your job security, the respect of your peers, or the stability of your life. The fear of losing these things can push you to act with a sense of urgency and determination that the fear of failure alone might not stir. Now, what if you could apply this to your own life? What if the fear of losing your dreams, your potential, your future became the fuel that pushed you to act every time you felt paralyzed by fear? Think about it. The next time you're standing on the edge of an important decision, afraid of making the wrong choice, instead of letting that fear freeze you, you could flip the script. You could ask yourself, what do I stand to lose if I don't act? What happens if I stay where I am, stuck in this moment of indecision? Here's a practical step you can take. Before you face any situation that makes you feel fearful or uncertain, whether it's a career move, a personal decision, or a creative endeavor, pause for a moment and really think about what you have to lose. What would it mean for you to stay where you are? What are the long-term consequences of inaction? Is the risk of doing nothing more damaging than the fear of trying and failing? Now let's build a little emotional loop here. Think back to a time when fear kept you paralyzed. Maybe you wanted to speak up at a meeting but held back, afraid of being judged. Or perhaps you've avoided taking a step towards something important in your life, afraid of what could go wrong. Got that moment in mind? Now, imagine what would have happened if instead of letting that fear hold you back, you had felt the fear of losing everything you've worked for. The fear of letting your dreams slip away, pushing you into decisive action. What would that look like? How might your life be different if you turned that fear into motivation instead of retreating into inaction? Let me share an example to illustrate this. Think about someone like J.K. Rowling. When she first began writing Harry Potter, she faced not only the fear of failure, but also the fear of losing the chance to build something meaningful. She had nothing but an idea and a passion to make it work. But instead of letting her fear of failure paralyze her, she reframed her mindset. She realized that the cost of not trying, the fear of never knowing if her dream could become reality, was greater than the fear of rejection or failure. So, she pushed through the countless rejections, the self-doubt, and the uncertainty until her work was finally published. The fear of loss, the fear of losing the chance to create something that could change the world, drove her to keep going. This is how fear can be used as a catalyst for action. Instead of letting fear stop you, you can harness it to propel yourself forward. The fear of losing your potential, your dreams, your time, those are all powerful motivators. When you tap into that fear, it can push you to do things you otherwise might not have the courage to do. So, now you're probably wondering, how can you condition yourself to act like this consistently? How can you make fear not just a momentary push, but a regular source of motivation? In the next section, we'll explore how you can train yourself to use this tactic every day, so you can turn your fear into an unstoppable force for growth. Conditioning the mind to use fear as a source of motivation isn't something that happens overnight, but it's a process, one that with practice can become second nature. The more you intentionally act on fear, the more your brain starts to associate fear with action and progress rather than with paralysis. This is where the power of repetition comes in. Conditioning works because the more you practice a certain response, the more automatic it becomes. Just like training a muscle, you can train your mind to use fear as a tool. In the beginning, it might feel forced or unnatural, but the more you expose yourself to situations where fear arises, the easier it becomes to respond in a way that drives you forward instead of holding you back. A great place to start is by using simple, daily practices that gently train your mind to focus on the fear of loss. Visualization is an incredibly effective tool here. Take a few moments each day to imagine the consequences of not acting. What will happen if you don't take that step forward, if you don't speak up, or if you don't take that risk? This helps condition your brain to see fear not as something to avoid, but as a powerful motivator for action. You can also use affirmations. Remind yourself regularly what's at stake, what you stand to lose by not acting. Whether it's your time, your dreams, your growth, or your future, anchoring yourself to these potential losses helps you maintain perspective and focus. But here's the key. You don't need to tackle the biggest fear in your life right away. Start small. The brain responds well to small wins, and each time you act in the face of fear, you build momentum. This is where the concept of micro-actions comes in. These are tiny, manageable steps that move you forward, even if they feel insignificant at first. Maybe it's making a phone call you've been avoiding, or sending an email you've been putting off. These small actions help your brain start associating fear with productivity. Instead of seeing fear as something that stops you, you begin to see it as something that motivates you to take action, even if it's in small bursts. Here's a simple exercise to get you started. Think of one fear you've been avoiding. It could be something personal or professional, a decision you've been putting off because of the fear of failure or rejection. Now, apply the Machiavellian tactic we discussed earlier. Focus on what you stand to lose if you don't act. What are the long-term consequences of avoiding this fear? What could slip away if you don't take the leap? Once you visualize that loss, take immediate action. Do something, even if it's a small step toward confronting that fear. This could be as simple as scheduling a meeting or starting a conversation. The key is to move, to take that first step, no matter how small. And remember, this doesn't have to be perfect. The act of moving forward is the victory. By now, you should be ready to put these practices into motion. As you continue to train your mind to use fear as a source of motivation, you'll find that these small actions add up. Over time, fear will no longer feel like a wall you have to climb. Instead, it will be a catalyst for growth and progress. In the next section, we'll dive into how these new habits can transform your life, how consistently acting on fear can help you unlock a new level of personal power and success. You're about to see how this shift in mindset can propel you toward your greatest achievements. Imagine a future where fear no longer holds you back. A life where you step forward each day with confidence, clarity, and resolve. Picture yourself making decisions with ease, knowing that fear, instead of paralyzing you, is now your fuel. You no longer hesitate or second guess. You approach challenges with a sense of purpose, recognizing fear as a natural force, but one you can harness for growth. Whether it's speaking up in a meeting, making that bold career move, or taking the leap in a personal relationship, fear becomes the motivation to act, not the reason to stay stuck. Every step you take is propelled by the energy of the very thing that once held you back. Your life transforms when you stop fearing fear itself. You realize that fear isn't a sign of weakness. It's a signal that you're on the edge of something great. The more you face it, the more you realize how much power you've had all along, waiting to be unlocked. Machiavelli understood this better than anyone. He knew that fear, when used wisely, could secure power, influence, and respect. His ability to use fear as a tool to shape his world is part of the reason his legacy still endures today. But here's the key. Machiavelli didn't reserve this wisdom for rulers alone. He understood that everyone has the potential to wield fear, to use it to drive action and shape their own future. This principle isn't just for kings and conquerors. It's for anyone who wants to unlock their potential and create the life they desire. Now, as you stand at the crossroads of this journey, the question is, are you ready to embrace fear as the tool it is? The secret is not in eliminating fear, but in using it to propel you forward. Fear isn't the enemy. It's the ally that will push you to build the life you deserve. Take that first step today.